Hello and welcome to episode 80 of the DX Mentor, a discussion with Ward Silver, N0AX, about his ham radio journey, his many contributions to ham radio, and the Yasme Foundation. I'm Bill, AJB. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you like what you find, please subscribe. Another way to keep in touch and to see what we're up to is via the DX Mentor Facebook page. I will be posting about upcoming podcasts as well as other DX events, so please follow us. You can check the show notes for any of the information that we discussed today. In addition to Ward, Joe, WAGEX, will be joining us as well. So here's a bit about Ward. Ward was first licensed at age 16 in 1972 as WN0 Golf Quebec Papa and upgraded to extra class and received November 0 Alpha X-ray N0AX in 1975. Ham radio led directly to electrical engineering studies at the University of Missouri, Rolla, and a BSEE degree in 1978. He then spent the next 20-something years in field and product development engineering. In 1983, Ward moved to Seattle area and after his twin boys grew up, started putting up antennas and getting on the air more regularly. About that time, he discovered the Western Washington DX Club, www.dxc.org, and found a community of like-minded operators. During the 1990s, Ward became more active in contesting and DXing, eventually appearing in the DXCC honor roll, lots of contest top 10 boxes, and on a few record lists. He was fortunate to be among the founders of the World Radio Sport Team Championship, first held in Seattle in 1990, and served on the sanctioning committee until 2019. In 2004, he joined the Yasme Foundation, which is yasme.org, as a board member, becoming the organization's president in April of 2013, and he enjoys extending a helping hand to amateur radio operators around the world that way as well. Ward finally got to go on a real DXpedition in 2005 as part of the K-7 Charlie team's adventure to Kura Atoll and managed not to wreck the boat, even though he was permitted to pilot it more than his experience at sea warranted, and we'll talk about that. In 2000, Ward began writing and teaching in earnest, realizing an achievement that he never thought possible in his younger days, becoming the lead editor for the legendary ARRL Handbook and the ARRL Antenna Book. He is also the author and editor of 3 ARRL licensed study guides. He's also written Ham Radio for Dummies, as of 2021 in its 4th edition, Two-Way Radios and Scanners for Dummies from 2006, and Circuit Building for Dummies in 2008. One of his most well-received ARL books is Grounding and Bonding for the Radio Amateur. Ward was honored to receive the Bill Orr Technical Writing Award in 2003 and again in 2016 from the ARL, and he has been awarded some QST cover plaques. For a bit of fun, Ward published what will be the first of an infrequent line of ham radio detective novelettes, Ray Tracey, Zone of Iniquity, with a big thanks to Jeff Murray, K1NSS, for some superb graphics and cover art. A second tale of Ray's exploits is in the works, and we'll talk about that. A couple of years ago, Ward received the humbling and unexpected honor of being selected as the Dayton Hamventions Amateur of the Year for 2008. Then, in 2015, Ward was inducted into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. So we have a lot to talk about. It's very entertaining, so let's get started. Well, good evening and welcome to the DX Mentor. And we've got a really great guest tonight. We're very excited about this. It's a name and a call that anybody associated with ham radio knows, and I'm just honored that he would agree to do this, and we're just pleased to talk to him and get some information. And that's Ward Silver, N0AX. And we are psyched. We got a list of questions, and I'll tell you, I went over his resume and stuff, and we could have 4 shows based on everything I saw, but we'll try to keep it in a reasonable time frame. But to get us started, as always, we have Joe, WAGEX. Joe, how are you?
Well, doing pretty good, and good evening, Bill and Ward. I got started when I was a teenager as an SWL. Did that for several years, and excuse me, got my technician class license and got on 6 meters, and then advanced on up through the licensing. Been on 62 D expeditions, and been a DXer from day one. I'm on the radio every day. Of course, I'm retired now, so that's nice. So Ward, how'd you get started?
Okay, well, how did I get started in ham radio? That's been a long time, almost 60 years ago. And I was stumbling around in the library in 1966, and I found a copy of QST that's like browsing the internet today. Just my mom would go over and dump me at the library while she did other stuff. And so I was just wandering around and, looking at stuff. And here was this neat magazine, people doing interesting stuff. And I thought, that could be me. So I started reading it, and I was interested in electronics. And it took a while. I didn't get licensed for a few years. I finally got help from my Elmer, who's Bill Agrosky, now KJ7 PC. Thank you, Bill. He taught the code over at his house, and finally passed the test in December of 71, and then had that interminable wait for the actual paper license to show up. And like a lot of people, I discovered what my call sign was in an envelope from a little print shop and
Yeah.
the QSL vendor. But anyway, wound up in WN0GQP. And so that was fun. My ham radio club buddies in high school were great. They were really helpful. And then I got involved with the W0 Triple E Club. I'm wearing a W0 Triple E shirt.
Oh,
There you
look at
go.
that.
Joe
Yeah.
Miner.
Yeah.
And went to college at University of Missouri at Rolla at the time. And they had a great club. It was right there on campus. Great big tower, great big antenna, a big dipole that went all the way across campus from the smokestack to this other building. It was not hard to tell where the radio club was. So anyway, that's basically how I got started. And my favorite parts of ham radio are antennas and propagation and station building. So I kind of gravitated toward DXing and contesting. So I'm also scientifically, as an engineer, I'm sort of scientifically involved with this stuff. And so I was an early supporter of HamSci, hamsci.org, and the Personal Space Weather Station. And, if you're interested in the science of propagation and all that, those hamsci.org, HAMSCI, is a great website with lots of stuff on it. So that's basically my journey in ham radio from 1966 until now.
I will put those notes in the show notes. I used to work for a guy at Hewlett Packard who was from Rolla. His name was Tom Nee, or went to University of Missouri Rolla. Tom Nebel was his name, but I don't know what his major was. So, but at some point early on, you migrated west and you joined the Western Washington DX Club. And that really seemed to kind of get you going and vault you. And I thought it was interesting. You said it was a group of hams that had a sense of humor. And you called that out in such a way that I thought there's got to be more to it than just a turn of a phrase.
Yeah. Well, when you're up there in the corner, you're about as far as you get from everything propagation wise. I think Los Angeles and San Diego are probably the farthest contiguous United States from all the important DX countries. But we're up there, the suffering sevens, they used to call us, And so you had to have a sense of humor, and we had all these fun little award programs and things like that. And having a club, I mean, anybody needs to get a club. If you're going to be getting into DX with all of its history and all the things going on and all that, you really need to join some kind of a DX club. And they're really helpful, and you get to meet all these people that you hear on the air that get through the pileups before you. And you find they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you. And they're really quite helpful. You wind up learning a lot about propagation and when to get on and club has its little network of, hey, 1A0KM is on the air, he's listening up, something like that, to help you get those pileups and the cards and all that stuff. And typically, it's a great way to find stuff to build up your station. Joe, you probably have had this experience many times. It's like, oh, I really need a something, or I blew up a tube in this amp. Has anybody got one? And somebody in the club will say, oh yeah. So
Yeah, they always say if you need aluminum, talk to Joe.
Yeah.
yeah.
I got plenty of it on there. And we do the same thing with our club. Bill's our president of Southwest Ohio DX Association. So if I see something hot going on, I'll put a note out on the reflector, let the guys and girls know what's happening.
It's not like the old days where we're calling each other at 2 a.m. on the phone.
Yeah.
Going down the call list.
Yeah.
Or you'd have the one middle of the night thing. You didn't want to let it ring and ring and ring. So you let it ring once and then hang up, and then you knew, oh, something's on the air. I need to go check this out. So even today with the internet, there's still plenty of localized information that you need for your area or whatever. Oh, he's working eights, something like that.
Let's get him. In our club there for a while, we were on 146.58 simplex. So that was fine in the daytime and in the evening, but then at night when we're all in bed, you're right. And I use a baby monitor now.
Mm-hmm.
I put one in the shack and the other one in my bedroom, and I'm on JT alert, and I hear my tone going off, and I know to get up and go.
There you go.
When he's real tired, he starts looking for the bottles, but those are old days. So, you bring up a really good point, because I can remember one of the guys in the club one time said, hey, and I was fairly new, and he said, hey, when you get a call from someone or you hear something, what do you do? And I said, oh, I let the members know right away. And he said, you work him, and then you let the...
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And I listened to the logic, and I said, my goodness, he's right, because by the time Joe and these other guys get in, I wouldn't have a chance. So why was I doing that,
Yeah, the message has to be, I just worked so-and-so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with some details, right? So so as we transition into the 90s, you became really a top contester as well as DXCC, and you made the honor roll. How did all of that come up? I mean, that's a huge chunk to cover here, but how did all that come about?
Well, the Western Washington Club was also into contesting. And so the club competitions in the ARL contest was important. We had a lot of intra club competitions, and we had lists of scores and all that kind of stuff. And so DXing and contesting are really very, very similar. And people that are DXers are often contesters. And it's like a friend of mine said, DX is what you do between contests. So, it's a natural overlap. And then the club, to become a good contester, you really need to know people a little bit. It's not just technique. There's few people that are very isolated, and it seems like you never hear them or see them except when they're contesting. But usually they're intimately involved in a club in some way or some group. And so the DEX club, the contest club, I'm also a charter member of the Mississippi Valley DX and Contest Club. They're just really, really quite the same, and you get to contribute beyond just participating. So that helps you become a top rate contester, because you learn all the call signs, and people know your name, and they know what you like to do, and you kind of hey, I know that guy, I know that call sign, and that's that's really helpful. It's very encouraging. And so really, if you're going to achieve all these things, the key is putting your butt in the chair. You can't you can't work it if you're not engaged enough. Whether it's in your phone now, or a laptop or tablet, or whether you're home or whatever, you got to be there. You got to be on the air.
And you have to listen, right?
You got to listen, listen, listen. Or how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
It's reps is how you get your code speed up. Just get on the air and do it. That's the thing. And then you've got the club to encourage you and say, hey, really nice score. Or how would you like to come over and operate at my station, or something like that. And then, I mean, the real key eventually is, after you get the skills, then you got to have the hardware. So you need to have decent antennas in a decent location. And in typical ham, you're driving around, you go, oh, that's a great location, radio location. Addresses like Sunset Drive, and Tower Hill Road, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Most of the good contesters have a reasonably good QTH and good enough antennas. It's like Ken Adams, K5K8, now a silent key, regrettably. He was a mentor, and he decided that from Oklahoma, he was not going to win DX contests. Okay. He said, but boy, I've got a great location for, in the mid-continent for domestic contests. So he optimized his station with antennas that you look at and go, well, those aren't really all that high. No, but they put a footprint into the 8s and the 9s and the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. And he was a force to deal with in domestic contests. So you learn a lot about station building and station design. Decent antennas, decent location, butt in the chair, and practice, practice, practice. That's how you do it.
So you're you're firing on all cylinders, it sounds like, and then something in the back of your mind said, I need some kind of an Olympic equivalent here for radio contesting. How did that all come around?
Oh, the World Radio Sport Team Championship.
Yeah.
The first one was in 1990. Really, Danny, K7 Sugar, also known as K7 something something, or K7 Slant 6. He is an idea guy, and he's really key to the Western Washington activity and that community, really, up there. You may be surprised to know that Western Washington, the section, now has more hams than any other section. And it's a very enthusiastic group. Anyway, Danny was a leader in that group, and he liked to have fun with radio. He likes to get on and enjoy himself. He's just an idea guy. So his idea said, listen, we can't win contests from up here in Western Washington. Like it's hard. I'll put it that way. And he said, why don't, instead of everybody operating from their own station and with a geographic advantage or disadvantage, just let's bring them all together and they operate from one place. And so that was kind of the start. And he formed a group to do it and invited me to participate in the group. And this was after we'd worked on a couple of other projects. And so the World Radio Sport Team Championship was Danny's basic idea. Let's bring everybody here. And so then the group figured out how to do it. And we had no idea how much work it was going to be. None. It basically takes over your life for a year or so at least. And as you can see from the current structures, which are much larger than us, it took us, I guess, a year or something to plan, and they're doing it for 4 years, and it's like the Olympics. But so Danny was the idea guy behind the group. So there were some common calls in that group, and there were some people you never heard of. And we just started putting the pieces together, and my job was kind of technical, station selection and evaluation and figuring out some of that. Um, it was really amazing, and it was a great opportunity to go from a participant to a leader within the community. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if you ever get a chance to participate in one of those things, take it as a volunteer or a leader or a participant or a judge or whatever. You meet many people that you've heard on the air for the very first time, and you make lifelong friends. You really do.
Sure.
In 1990, that was the first time many of the Zone 15 and 16 guys had ever been out of their countries.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Iron Curtain had just come down. And so many of them had never been allowed even to meet foreigners. And so here they were flying over to Seattle. And for example, let's see, who was it? UA1DZ. He was a top antenna designer in the Soviet Union, and he'd never been allowed to meet people. And here's all these people coming from all over, and it's a little known thing. We had to get special permission from these countries, or from the FCC, for the operators from these countries to use an American call and operate in America. There was no CEBT or anything like that. And it got down to less than 2 weeks before the contest, and we still didn't have permission. And we're thinking, okay, what are we going to do with these guys from OK and LZ and YO and all these places and UA? What are we going to do with them? And finally, a fax came through, and it gave specific people specific permission to use American calls on this one day while they were over here.
Really?
So it was getting pretty close. We had a couple people with legal connections talking to the FCC, and they finally got it pushed through. So there's a lot of paddling underneath the water that think about.
So,
go ahead, Joe.
On your station there in Western Washington, did you have a lot of big towers or?
Oh, my station there?
No.
Oh, the ones that we operated from.
Yes.
It was all from individual stations, and good functional contest stations. The winner, who was the winner? K1DG and K1AR were the winners, and it was not from the biggest station. There were some big stations. There were, modest stations and good locations, and good stations and not so good locations and all that. But we didn't do this thing that they started in subsequent WRTCs, where they would actually have, you would get a tower and a beam and a wire and all that.
Yeah.
We had 2 transceivers, one using the station's antennas, and the receive transceiver. It could only receive, it couldn't transmit. We gave everybody 100 feet of wire and said, here, throw it out the window. That's your receive antenna. So it was pretty crude by today's standards, but we had a wonderful time with it.
Yeah.
I did read the Contact Sport, the book about the WRTC.
Yes, by Jim George.
Yeah, and what amazed me was all the challenges everybody had. There was only 1 or 2 complaints about the station area they were giving, because the odds of finding 20 or 25 somewhat similar plots, not on top of each other, that to me would have seemed to be the most insurmountable problem that you all had.
Oh, it was a huge problem. If you know anything about the Western Washington topography, it's very hilly, and it goes from sea level to several thousand feet within the the boundaries of the club. So that was a real problem. We tried to pick stations that were in the clear, but some were in town. We had one station with serious noise problems. We had another station that had power failure. It's just, you never know what you're going to get. I think the stations that were most fair were in Russia in 2010, although I couldn't go to that. They were on the plains outside Moscow, and everybody was on flat ground. I mean, there was nobody that had even the slightest hill. So that was really fair. And of course, the Russians have been doing a competition like WRTC for years, so they already knew how to pull that off. And that's the ideal thing. Of course, the ideal thing would all be on the beach, with vertical
Yeah.
and guys bringing you drinks,
Yeah.
every few hours. And Germany was quite similar. The Italians had worked it out, and I think the English for 2026, they're all in the Norfolk area, northeast of London, and that's a flat open area as well. So, but you know how it is with radio, it's a spotlight thing, and you think, oh, this is going to be a great location, and you still get beat by somebody with a tri-bander, a couple 100 feet below you. It's just luck of the draw and what happens on that particular day.
Yeah,
I guess I should say that I worked on the WRTC for 30 years, and I was on what's called the sanctioning committee. It's not a steering committee. This doesn't actually run the show. It's you make a proposal to us, we'll give you the guidelines, we'll work something out, and then it's up to you to implement those guidelines somehow. And sometimes there's some back and forth between the sanctioning committee and the hosts. But I thought 30 years was about enough.
Yeah.
The second, yeah.
The other thing that jumped out in the book was the camaraderie. And when we talked to Bill AC0W on a podcast, and just the way he described it, I mean, he knew quite a few, but there were a lot there he didn't know. But when they were done, he felt like, well, this is a whole group of friends now, and I'm really excited going forward. And
absolutely, yeah. You get to know, first of all, if you're a referee. Referee's one of the hardest jobs, because you got to sit there and listen for 24 hours while these guys operate, and you go, man, I could do better than that. And you just got to sit there and take it. But you're best friends with them, and everybody really gets along very well. There's been a couple of instances with problems with one person or another, but in general, it's a very compatible community, and everybody does their best. They realize that all the compromises that have to be made to make this happen. And it's not like an athletic sport where you can get out the chalk machine, and lay down yard lines and put out bases and sticks and stuff like that. It's all in your mind.
Yeah, it was very interesting reading, even the strategy behind it, and some people chose, to stay on open band just continue running. Other one would go off and say, well, if we can get a multiplier here and a multiplier there, and it was very, very interesting. And I coached basketball for years, and I used to love all-star games because you'd get to see all these different players and how they played, and that struck me that a certain amount of that you'd be able to really experience and enjoy. So very cool.
I got a follow-up question.
Go ahead, please.
On that, Ward. What do you do about food?
Well, let's see. Everybody typically brings snacky things to eat, and water or energy drinks or whatever. You don't. Well, it's funny. I got to tell you a story from 1990. Paolo I2UIY and Ivan IK2. I want to say DX or something like that. Were operating from Danny's house, K7SS, and Ivan was a pasta chef, and Paolo I2UIY was a pasta eater. And if you knew Paulo, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
And they got about halfway through the contest, and Paulo says, "It's time to eat." And so they stopped. They stopped operating, and they went
Really?
upstairs. And Ivan made this wonderful pasta dish, and everybody ate and went back downstairs. That's highly unusual. Everybody is really focused on the radio now, and you
Sure.
have little drink, energy bar, whatever, and then you're starved at the end. But
Yeah.
it's a 24-hour thing, and IARU. The original contest was only 10 hours. So
Okay.
So does I'm just curious, Ward, does the operator set up and tear down, or is that all done by the local club?
the local club sets up the tent and the antennas. So they put up the beam, they put up the wire. You're allowed to move the wire around. There's a number of rules about that, but they want to make sure that everybody has equivalent stations. So there's a tent, there's chairs, there's tables, all that kind of stuff. So they give you the infrastructure, but you have to bring all of your radios and whatever magic boxes and cables. And you also have to provide an interface for the referee to be able to listen to both stations at the same time, whichever he or she wants to listen to. And you have to record the entire contest for the log checkers in case there is a question. And Bill, you'll remember the chapter in contact sport about the challenges of determining whether a particular multiplier was actually worked or not worked by the stations, and it made a difference between third and fourth place.
Yeah.
Is a medal decision. But anyway, that answers your question, I guess, Joe.
Yes.
And back in the day, I mean, radios and computers and monitors, there was a lot of gear. And nowadays you can bring a laptop and a fairly compact transceiver, and you're good to go. It's a lot easier now.
I remember there was another group that had a problem with their computer. They got the laptop up and running, and then poof.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe.
Yeah, we even lost logs in Slovenia in 2000. The Finns had a disaster in 2000, and again in 2002, the Finn team lost their logs, or it was compromised in some way. It was a real tragedy.
Well,
Gee.
that would be a heartbreaker to go through all that. And it's very much like an Olympic athlete, right? Who's trained and trained and trained. He pulls a muscle and warm up the day before, and
there you go.
And now you can't go.
You blow an engine in the first turn,
Yeah.
That's
boom.
right. That's right. So the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, well, all of this, of course, but one thing I know nothing about, and I've been doing this since '72, and I know nothing about Yasme. I know that Iris and Colvin were the folks that they were going all around the world doing DXpeditions and stuff. And I've got several cards from their DX, but I know nothing about Yasme. And I thought, I've always wanted to meet you. I've always wanted to talk to you. I knew we'd have a lot to chat about, but this is one topic I want to make sure we cover. So
Okay.
How did you get in it? What is it? How can we get involved?
I'm looking for the Yasme book. It's around here someplace in my giant library here. Anyway, okay, Yasme is based on a Japanese word, yasume, which means sort of peace or contentment. It's one of those inscrutable, not quite translatable words. And that was the name of Danny Weil's first boat. Danny was the first traveling DXpeditioner. Before that, there had been a couple of DXpeditions, but pretty much it was fixed stations for DXing. So instead of Yasumi, it was Yasme. That was his boat. He was a young man. He decided he was going to go to sea. That's a British tradition, I guess. And so he bought this small boat, and he said, I'm going to sail it across the Atlantic. Somebody said, hey, you really ought to get a ham radio license. Oh, really? What's that? So he wasn't even licensed before he started. So he got his ham radio license, or Morse code and stuff, and started out, I think he left from West Africa someplace, and sailed across the Atlantic and started making contacts. And by the time he got over to the Caribbean, he was, pretty well known. Hey, here's this guy. He's out on the ocean, and he's going to go to the Caribbean. And as it turned, well, back in the day, this is 1953, 54, something like that. And he had those big old radios, that had handles, and that's why the name was Viking, because that's what it took to lift them. So Danny had a pair of he had a receiver transmitter, and he had a wire on the boat. So he's in the Caribbean, and they're going, well, where are you going to operate now? So he got an education about DXing. A lot of islands in the Caribbean in those days had never been activated, or they were very rare. There was no airplane travel. There were no cruises. It was down there in the Hongo. People just, it was very unusual to hear a signal from down there. So he was convinced to sail around and operate from these different islands, and he kept a paper log and all this stuff. Well, one thing led to another, how this goes. And he got in with Herb Ackerley, AP2 Alpha Alpha. And Herb was a big time DXer, and he was one of these guys. I have a joke about what's the difference between a DXer and a contester. And a DXer has to light his pipe between every QSO. Well, Herb was the prototype for that. He had a big old pipe there, a real nice shack. And so Herb sort of acted as Yasme Central there for a while. And he would coordinate donations for Danny and all this stuff. And it went back and forth. So after this got going, Herb said, look, we can't run all this through my checking account. How about if we start a foundation, a charitable foundation, and people can donate to this, and the foundation will then pay for Danny's operating expenses and keep him on the air. And that's how it worked for 5 years. And Danny basically sailed around the Caribbean activating all these places, and then he would stop somewhere and he would mail the log to Herb and all this stuff. So he had QSL expenses and postage expenses and gasoline and food and all this kind of stuff. So the Yasme Foundation kept him going. And then of course let me back up a minute. There is a book called the Yasme book. And if you go to our Yasme website, Yasme, YASME.org, it's on there. It's a free PDF. You can download it. It's a wonderful book. It was written by Jim Kane, K1TN, who was a great writer for ARL for many years. And it explains an awful lot about DXing and how the modern DXing came to be. So anyway, it describes all this with Danny and the 3 boats. So Yasme 1 hit a reef and sunk. And that was off Grenada, I think. And that was life-threatening in those days. Of course, everybody wanted to know, did you get the logs? But he was able to save all that stuff. So then there was Yasme 2. But while he was refitting that, I guess they had a fuel leak or something, and it blew up and sunk. This was in Scotland. Yeah. And so then there was Yasme 2.5. And that one sunk out in the Coral Sea. He was all the way out by Australia and New Guinea at that point, and he had to be rescued by the Australian Navy. I believe he was actually kind of going down, and he was hanging onto the mast, and he could see the sharks, and it's like Jaws. And so Yasme 2.5 went down, and then he got Yasme 3, and Yasme 3 was successful in navigating around the Caribbean and did some more stuff. And by 1960 or 61, I don't remember, he basically said, I'm done. Okay, so he sold the boat. It was still above water, it was still floating. And he retired to Houston and went back to his first career, which was watchmaking. And so everybody's kind of sitting around going, well, now what do we do? And so the Yasme Foundation was on the verge of being disbanded, and its assets distributed and whatever. But in a fateful conversation, Lloyd Colvin, W6KG, and Iris, W6QL, they had sold a construction business and done pretty well for themselves, and they loved DXing and operating. And Iris said, why don't we go? And so they started going, and they visited 269 countries.
Really?
200, and this was highly non-trivial in those days. No, little jumper airlines everywhere. It was really hard. And I think they operated from 169 countries. And so these QSL cards that you have from anywhere between 1963, I think their first operation was somewhere out in the Pacific, the VR1 Line Islands or something. And the last operation was in Istanbul in Turkey in 1981, I think. And Lloyd had a heart attack and died, and that was the end of it. But Yasme was a formal operation by that point. It had been around for a long time, managed all the cards for Lloyd and Iris. They could pay their own way, but they needed some administrative structure to handle the cards and stuff. So that's what they did. And they're still, occasionally, we still get a card. Somebody going through their old logbooks and finding a card from a Lloyd and Iris, and they'll send it in. We have a QSL manager, and it's all in the book and on the website. And so what happened was we transitioned from dealing with the Colvins and all of their stuff and all of their expeditions to making donations. The estate of the Colvins was very generous and provided us an operating portfolio, I guess you would say. And so we have an income every year, and we're a 501c3. So we abide by those tax regulations. And our thing now is to open doors for amateur radio around the world. If we can find a project or a team or somebody that's doing something exciting to push ham radio to a new level somewhere, we're very interested in that. And lately, we've been very, very interested in supporting younger ops, like the youngsters on the air or the youth on the air over here in the Americas. We made a lot of donations so they've come up to speed. And I think that's a very, very positive thing for amateur radio generally. So that's what we do now. We do not fund DXpeditions. There's a lot of organizations like NCDXF, Indexa, the Chiltern guys, all these other supporting organizations for DXpeditions. We don't support those unless there's some really novel technical angle or maybe a youth component. We made a donation to the PJ6Y expedition that's coming up specifically to support the expenses of the younger ops that are going to be on the air there.
Greg Marco's doing a whale of a job with that group.
Yeah, he really is. And they're bringing in a lot of new faces and operators who we've never heard of before that are going to be, particularly young ones, that are going to be operating through a remote link. They're going to do the various radio in a box kind of thing that George AJ7 JV has invented. And there's some really cool aspects to that. But we don't do here's $5,000 to go to Bouvet. It's specifically focused on little projects where we can have a big impact and help them. We're like angel investors, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
We're not going to out donate ARDC, for example, or NCDXF for that matter, but we might help somebody with a prototype project like these two guys, Keith W0AAE and Nathan K4NHW, I think. that put up a small station on an abandoned Coast Guard light platform off North Carolina. It's called Frying Pan Tower Light. And they're out there in the Atlantic. And they said, we'd like to put up a remote station here, got a link back to the mainland, and we'll get have young ops sign up to operate this thing over the remote. So we gave them some money to get that done. And then, we'll see where it goes. Yeah. I've been a director in Yasme since 2004. Fred Lown took me to lunch, K3ZO, at the Visalia convention, and described what they wanted. And boy, you just don't say no to Fred. And it was a very generous conversation. And this is all unpaid volunteer stuff. And then I became president in 2015 after Wayne N7NG retired, and I guess I'm pushing 10 years as the pres. So
wow, isn't it funny how it flies? Joe, go ahead.
So was her KV4 or KV2AA, was he the QSO manager for Lloyd and Iris?
I think he was for a little while.
Okay.
But, being on an island, it was difficult for him to manage that.
Yeah. Okay. I just wondered when he got out of the picture.
Well, that's a good question. You have to read the Yasme book.
Yeah.
So I have some paper copies left, but mostly you can download it as a PDF. Sure. Wonderful stories there.
I do the newsletter for us. I may include that in a newsletter one month.
Please do.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I can just reprint it and drop it in there. And so is Yasme a 501(c)(3), and is it something we can all
public charity registered in California?
Okay.
Yeah. So there's 9 directors right now, and we meet once. And now that we're past the pandemic, we can meet in person once a year. We had a meeting at Dayton, and then we meet 2 or 3 other times through the year online. Plus, we've got email going on all the time.
Sure.
All right. I'm making some notes about how you like to give money to projects with young people. And Joe and I were about to announce we have several hundred young people that we're going to be working with. So I'm kidding.
Time to go. You're breaking up there, Bill.
2RM.
Yeah.
There you go.
So now you've been on several DXpeditions, right?
Well, I've been on one major DXpedition, and several contest expeditions to various places. Like the big one that I went on was K7C to Curie Atoll. It was the last expedition there.
Yeah.
So it's been 20 years since that's been on the air. They actually have a very vigorous volunteer program out there now. Used to be you had to fly to Midway and then charter a little boat to get from Midway to Curie. That's 60 miles. Curie is the last point in that line of seamounts that's above the waves, and it's called the Darwin Point. It is the most northerly coral atoll in the world that's still above water.
Above water.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. But when we were out there, they were still a couple of Coast Guard buildings from the Loran days, and they had the big concrete pedestal that the antenna was on, and I have a piece of number 10 wire that was out of the radio field. And the problem was the Air Force was flying things out, and I guess the Coast Guard really, but they had a crushed coral runway and a lot of buildings and equipment, people coming and going, and all this kind of stuff. Well, they brought in a whole bunch of invasive species, and so the island was overrun with ants, and ants in this flowering stuff called verbena, which is sort of a variation on a sunflower. So the island was in really bad shape when we got there, and the volunteers were pulling up the verbena and fumigating the ants and stuff like that. They'd get all over the birds, and the birds would nest on the ground. because there's no trees. So the chicks would hatch and then the ants would get them. It was a pretty awful situation. But
Really?
since then, the Hawaiian Fish and Wildlife Office has made tremendous strides in restoring that particular island, and also a couple of the other ones, the French Frigate Shoals and others along the chain of islands, which is 1,400 miles from Honolulu. It's a long way. You see that little map of the Hawaiian Islands, they put about 6 or 7 islands on there. There's 1,400 miles out there. So they've gotten some ducks to reappear, and they've worked hard. There's a lot of volunteers.
Wow.
So
Joe,
what was the lady's name that used to live on the island and sort of run the island, Ward?
Well, that was Kathleen. What was her name? I want to say Catherine, and I don't remember her last name. She was the actual manager of Hawaiian Fish and Wildlife, or she managed that island. She was out there about half the year, and she'd go back and forth every 6 months. And there were a couple of volunteers out there that were with her. Catherine lived in a teepee, which was perfectly good, for out there.
Yeah.
The cinder block buildings were ovens, and so they had one for storage and one for an office. But we stayed in tents while we were out there, and they had monk seals, and she was in charge of managing the island, and it was. We had some real difficult logistics. It was a very hard place to land, and we had some problems with our N0AX. And so she loaned us a dinghy, and it was, instead of 100 yards from the boat to the shore, it was 4 miles through the lagoon, and all this kind of stuff. We had to change our operating plan on the fly and everything.
Sure.
Yeah, it was really pretty amazing. We were on the island for 2 weeks. And it took 5 days to sail out there on the Machias, which is a 72-foot steel-hulled boat. And we had the 12 of us in the team and 4 or 5 in the crew, so it was pretty crowded. And then on the way back, we had to sail into the wind. And so 9 days of sailing into the wind, 1,400 miles at 6 knots. And so you're listening to that diesel 24 hours a day going, So just the logistics of getting back and forth were something. And while we were out there, what really made it challenging, the radio stuff worked great, the antennas worked fine, but we had low sunspots. So that was a problem. That was always a challenge. We could work Japan and United States pretty much anytime we want, but Europe was real challenge. And that was the start of the Chinese over-the-horizon radar. Nobody had ever heard it before.
Yeah.
So late afternoon, all of a sudden, this thing would just appear, and it would just wipe out. For example, it would start around 3,600 and go to 4,300 kilohertz. Well, 75-meter phone is toast. It's 20 over 9 on the island. We didn't know where it was coming from. We didn't know that it was Chinese. We thought it might have been from Midway. It was so loud, 60 miles away, or maybe it was an Attu at the end of the Aleutians. We didn't know. And boy, it drove the 75-meter guys absolutely crazy, because we could work 80-meter CW anytime we wanted, when the band was open, and we could work Europe on 80 CW. And of course, the big 75-meter guns, they were just having kittens. You're on 80 CW. How about 75-meter phone? And I said, we're trying to explain that we've got this interference from 3,600 to 4,300 and other, bands that weren't amateur. We tuned around and found it was all the way up into the 18 megahertz. And they didn't get it. They didn't know. So it was real tough. It was just a challenging environment. We had these interesting little white crabs. I could go on for hours, about this stuff on the island, but we had these ghost crabs that buried themselves in the white coral sand through the day to keep out of the heat. And then at night, when it cooled down a little bit, they just emerge from the sand. You'd see the sand boiling, and then these crabs would show up. And Franz, DJ9CB, though that creeped him out. My job was to go in the tent before his operating shift and make sure there were no crabs in that tent, and then zip up the door so he could operate without worrying about a crab biting him on the feet or something like that. And we had big spiders, about this big. They weren't interested in us at all. They wanted the bugs, and but they're still pretty impressive.
Yeah.
There's always something.
Was John Kennan with you on Curie N7CQQ?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
he was on. I was on Midway with him.
John, John and Charlie, W7KK, I think. They were both out there. Gary Shapiro and I6T, Franz, DJ9CB, Gerd, DJ5, and I can't remember the last call. Bob, Alan, K6SRZ was there, and Santos, WA1S.
Oh, yeah.
And Steve, BE7 ST, I think. Ann is in Florida. She's doing well. Steve's still active. Let's see. Gary is not active anymore.
And I haven't heard Kennan on the radio in some time.
No, that's it's been 20 years. And of course, Bob, the most interesting ham in the world, he was the guy that put this all together, Bob KK6EK. And he said, my job is to get this expedition permitted, do the logistics, get you out there, get you back safely, and all within budget. And that's what he did. And he did operate, I think he made 2 contacts out there. That was it.
He's the Cortland DXpeditions guy.
Yeah.
I met him at the DX dinner. He's an interesting guy, and I haven't heard from him.
He's not very active in ham radio, I think, but he was. That was the first use of online QSO reporting.
Yeah, I got his book, and it was fascinating. But even in the book, he said there was some pushback because, he wanted
huge pushback.
Yeah, he wanted to basically say, if I'm going to Midway, we want to take a server and a satellite and a guy to operate all that. And the people were pushing back and saying, well, wait a minute, we can only take 12, so now you want me to take one less operator. Yeah. But man, the fact that you could do real-time logging, I mean, it's very interesting, the stuff that he did. I talked to him at the DX dinner, and then I haven't heard from him ever since. So
he's still out there. He's retired from his day job as a scientist, and he does lots of little things. I get a Christmas card every year. We talk every once in a while. I'll see him at Visalia out there. DXA was the app.
That's it. Yep.
That was the term greenies was the thing. You would get a little line of boxes. You had CW, and we had phone, and you had all the different bands. And if you were in the log, then you got a green check mark.
Yep.
Anybody could look at it, and see what N0AX had worked or whatever. And that was an unstable platform. I don't think people appreciated that he was working on that for 20 to 24 hours at a time to keep it running, and the coding, and just kind of making sure it was still functional, and he had to deal with the protocols, and there was a guy in California running the server.
So didn't he use that when he went to Herd Island?
Yeah.
He didn't. No. I think you're thinking of his Easter Island expedition, where he was going to just send you a card. Remember, they were going to just print them.
Yeah.
He got back, he was going to just feed the log into the printer and send you a card.
Yeah.
Well, the DXCC program wasn't having any of that, and that was a challenge. But they finally got that done, and then the DXCC program did not like the DXA either because they thought people would spoof the calls. They would watch the calls go by and then they would write down a call close to theirs,
Oh,
claim it was their contact and try to get a card before the other guy.
yeah. It was
If you, yeah,
it
if
was
you've
a
ever
broken
been,
call.
oh, I tell you,
Yeah.
you'd be amazed. Well, maybe not about the tricks that people will try to play to get
Sure.
contact with these places.
Sure.
So anyway, that worked, and that started off all of the real-time stuff.
Yeah. As I was flipping through the book just here, and I will put a link because it's a very interesting book. But the other part of the book is about the studies that he did
Yes.
and showing that the islands are shrinking and there was so much garbage on the beaches and all these different things he did. That I found that part to be really fascinating. It's like you hear about it, but until you can see some empirical evidence, you don't really.
Yeah, he was out there wandering around doing studies and taking measurements, and he collected a bunch of data before, during, and after. There were just tons of garbage. This is before the Pacific garbage patch became part of our, lingo. And fishing nets are the biggest problem, and they lose them. And I still got a few glass fishing floats
Mm.
that were, on the nets and stuff like that.
Wow.
That's it's an adventure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you see being on Curie and or Cure and Joe on Midway and stuff, the rig in a box is kind of it's kind of a great concept, right? Because Fish and Wildlife doesn't really want a bunch of people inhabiting it for 2 weeks, no matter how good you are at cleaning up.
Yeah.
Well, there's a wrinkle here. Yes, I technically you could do Curie Atoll with a rig in a box. That wouldn't be hard. There's a dock there. There was a lagoon. You could anchor offshore, motor in, and a launch, and you could set this thing up. This is not a U.S. Fish and Wildlife island. It's a Hawaiian.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's part of the Hawaiian island chain. So it's managed through Honolulu and not through the national service. And I think that Catherine didn't come. I'll put it this way: Catherine didn't come away with a warm fuzzy about ham radio operators. She didn't really grok what we were talking about with our proposals and stuff. And we got out there and started wanting to set up, verticals and stuff. And she was just like, wait, stop. And so there was a lot of back and forth at first before we actually got going. And she didn't really get it. So whatever, I think it's going to be a challenge for anybody to get permission to go back out there as long as she's running anything to do with the Hawaiian fish. It's not a knock on Catherine. It's just, that's the deal.
Right.
So maybe sometime.
She's not ham radio friendly.
No, well, she didn't really feel like here, I've got a cat. There we go. This is Miss Electra. There she goes. All right. That's it in there she goes. She's got a nice little box here. And no, she didn't come away with a warm fuzzy about ham radio for whatever reason, and she's kept that place going. She's got the island, kind of whipped back into shape. So kudos for Catherine.
Yep.
And maybe someday, things will stabilize and we can make this case that, hey, look at what happened on this island, Jarvis, I guess.
Yes.
Also very similar. We just roll this thing up. It's got, some antennas on it, and nobody is camping out. We're not going to harass the seals or the spiders or the ghost crabs or anything. And maybe,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was when people were talking about trying to get Jarvis to be an all-time new one. I remember that, and they were using maybe Baker as the comparative, but one was under the Hawaiian control and one was over the Fish and Wildlife. I remember this before now. So, yeah, well,
Yeah.
you only get one shot to save those islands. So it sounds like she's doing the job.
Yeah. might be a while. Things are rare, physically, um, expense wise, financially, politically,
Well,
socially, and the DXCC program is big and it has a lot of these things. Nobody ever thought Albania would, be on the air.
yeah,
And finally, Marty, another Yasme director, Marty cracked that nut and got ZA1A on. And, it's just tough. If we live long enough, we'll get to work North Korea. And I was just about to work Al 4L5FN portable P5. And he was just about to start working code and they threw him out.
Oh, wow.
So that's the one I need.
yeah.
But that one wouldn't surprise me with, if all of a sudden relations turn better and things, I know there's people knocking on the door. So some of the other ones that are war torn, et cetera, it's like, I'm not sure I want people going there because of the risks that they take. But if P5 were to ever happen, it's going to be under such controlled circumstances that
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, there's a funny story about Syria, which was also very tightly controlled.
Yeah.
And there was a expedition, I don't know, late 90s, I think, and W6OAT, another Yasme director, Rusty was on that team. And the only way they could get permission to operate was if they had two Secret Service, secret police operators monitoring every contact in a room next to the operating room. So they listened to every contact, and rapidly they discovered that these guys are harmless. They're nuts, but they're harmless. Okay, so we're just getting 2 weeks of enjoying listening to the pileups and stuff like that, and they became great friends with the operators and would cheer when a new country was worked and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so maybe something like that could happen in the future. I don't know.
So you've got all this great background. You've taken on some really outstanding volunteer positions and helped guide some major, Yasme and some other things. And all of a sudden you decide, I need something else to do. So why don't I be the lead editor for the handbook? So
it wasn't quite like that.
Okay, all right.
So I started writing for the ARL in 1995, doing crossword puzzles.
Really?
And that was, for QSD, and that was for a while. And then I started this hands-on radio column thing in the early 2000s. I think it was 2003, maybe, something like that. And Mark Wilson, K1RO, and I had been corresponding, and he was the publisher for QSC at the time. And the crossword puzzles and the quizzes were kind of running out of gas. So he said, well, you got any other ideas? And I said, well, at the time I was working at Seattle University as a lecturer, lab instructor at the Seattle University E department. And I had all these experiments that I had rewritten. And I said, listen, I've got some cool little electronic experiments here. Maybe we should run a few and see if anybody wants to, actually build something and test it. He says, all right, what the hell? We kicked it around and somebody contributed the name Hands on Radio, and we started running it. And it became very popular. And so people were really looking forward to that. I ran that for 15 years and 180 columns, 3 books. And now I understand the thing from Mark Twain about, I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one. So, trying to explain Maxwell's equations in 2 pages is a challenge. So anyway, that started in the early 2000s. And then Mark said, well, we've got to rewrite the tech manual. You want to take a whack at it? I said, sure. So I rewrote that completely. And then he said, okay, well, you didn't ruin that. How about the general? I said, well, all right. So I took that one on. And then I think I did the extra. And he said, well, okay, how about the handbook? You want to try the handbook? And
wow.
I said, Yeah, I'll do the handbook under the condition that I completely rewrite it because it had gotten to the point where it was useless. It was just kind of it was just old and it was tired.
Yeah.
There was a lot of obsolete junk in
Just
it.
patch upon patch upon patch. And
Yeah, you know how it is. And so he said, okay, go for it. And it took a year and a half to do the first one in 2010. And it was a big hit. I can't, whatever, people liked it. Whatever.
sure.
And so was then kind of, yeah, there's the antenna book. The antenna book came later. I was still modifying the license manuals every 4 years. They have to be redone. So, because there's a new question pool. So I was on the question pool committee supporting the ARL rep to the question pool committee. So I was contributing questions and then I'd rewrite the manuals. And so I'd do 3 manuals and then take a year off for that. And then I'd do a handbook every year as well. And then I think in 2011, 2012, then they gave me the antenna book because Dean Straw had left in 2007 or 8 and he was gone. So they needed an antenna book every 5 years or so. So I took that one on and rewrote that one, rearranged it. It's just new guy. Here he comes in. He's got his ideas. And so at one point, I was maintaining 3,000 pages of material for the league a year.
Gee.
And,
Wow.
you want a hobby?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. That's a lot. But, I didn't write it all originally myself. I have all these contributing editors. It's just dozens of people are happy to write for these publications if asked. And my job was to find them and ask them and pester them until they delivered and then edit it into the appropriate style and deal with the graphics and blah, 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 blah. And it kept me busy for quite a long time. It was not a volunteer position, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And so then there were these other books. I did a book called Antenna Modeling for Beginners. And that was real popular, but then Roy W7EL decided to pull the version of the demo software that book was based on and wouldn't make it available. So we pretty much had to pull the book off the market.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's too bad. But, EasyNet has been frozen by Roy. So maybe in my copious free time, I go back and adjust the book for the demo software. I don't know. And then I did somewhere along the way, I did this one, which is the Ham Radio for Dummies book.
Yes.
I started that in 2004, I think. I had talked to Mark Wilson. Maybe, at one point I said, Mark, is anybody writing Ham Radio for Dummies? The For Dummies series was really popular at the time. And he said, no, I don't think so. I said, I wonder how a person would do that. And he said, I have no idea. So we dropped it. 2 weeks later, somebody from Wiley, the publisher of the For Dummies line, called up the league and said, we'd really like to have a title, Ham Radio for Dummies. You know anybody who would write it? It just dropped in my lap. And so, so it's in its 4th edition now. And they were actually talking about doing another, but I said, we have to wait until the FCC decides what to do with ham radio before we go ahead, because we have no idea. And the grounding and bonding book, you asked about that.
Yes.
It was an interesting thing. Part of the hands-on radio, the series, there was a column called The Myth of RF Ground. And that started an enormous bunch of correspondence. I mean, people were coming out of the woodwork. And then I wrote 2 more columns on the basic concept, And by the time I got done with those columns, it generated more correspondence than anything else in 15 years. Out of 180 columns, those were the three that just blew up.
Wow.
And yeah, and I said to Steve Ford, who is now the publications guy at the league, I said, the problem is you've got the AC safety information is over here. And then you've got the lightning protection that's over here. And then you've got RFI and stuff like that. That's yet another bunch of books and stuff. And the average guy, the average ham has no idea how to integrate this all together. And if you approach it from an integrated system level standpoint, and I was a systems engineer in my final industrial days. I said, if you look at it from a systems point of view, you can bring all this information together. And they were looking at the correspondence and said, yeah, we need books. So ARL and I arranged to write this book. And it's an ARL product. I don't get any royalties or anything off of it. But we brought it all together, and it's been a big hit. So we did a second edition. Yeah.
Do you still get thrilled when you see your name in print?
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
It's not as wow as it used to be, but I like the fact that people like what I write, and it seems, I was really grateful to get the Bill Orr Technical Award, Technical Writing Award, and the QST cover plaques, and got a couple of the Bill Orr awards, and it's been very gratifying to
and well deserved.
Yeah.
I can remember I was fortunate. I had a article printed about displaying QSL cards on a monitor using a Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
And the league sent back and said, wow, we like this. Let's do it. And I was like, okay, whatever. And damn, when I did get the all the paperwork and then I got the actual copy, I was just thrilled. It was like, this is so cool. And I didn't think I would be that way, but I was. I was pretty, pretty pumped. And I can imagine you still get the same feeling. So
yeah.
Kind of like when I get to meet a guy like you, I get the same feeling. It's like I've heard of this guy, I know him, I've read him, but how cool is this?
Yeah, how cool is this? And that's fun. And there's a lot of other authors for the league, and I've enjoyed meeting all those folks and the contributing editors and contributing authors that spend a lot of time writing for the handbook and the antenna book and all these other things. The ARL has, of course, Becky Schoenfeld, W1BXI. She's the publications manager, and she has a staff of writers and editors. But pretty much all of the stuff that the ARL produces is done outside of headquarters. And it's that staff that puts it all together and makes it look nice and does the graphics and all these things. And every once in a while, there's a screw up and everybody goes crazy. But 99.9% of the time, they get it right. It's useful information on the air, has been a real good publication for beginning hams. And it's like I tell people about, ham radio for dummies. We're all dummies about something.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so important to have this big body of publications that you go, I'd really like to try meteor scatter. I wonder if the league has something about meteor scatter. And sure enough, QST articles, books, whatever, and you can go in there, figure it out, and try it.
Joe, he's the perfect candidate. Joe and I are starting oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Breweries on the air. You'd be the perfect guy to help us write about it.
Breweries on the air. Yeah, I'll work on commission. Okay.
Yeah.
So
a real case study.
Case study. Well done. I'll do the first draft.
Yeah, there you go. First, there you go.
So
real head on that. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. That's right. So there's this person floating around, I think, in the background, maybe up on your shelves or in your mind. His name's Ray Tracey.
Yes.
Who is Ray Tracey?
I got a Ray Tracey book around here someplace. Okay, so where did Ray Tracey come from? Well, ray tracing is a term used in propagation analysis and prediction. And so I adopted Ray Tracey as the inside joke name of a character. And where that came from, I was in Seattle, member of the Western Washington Club, and they had this newsletter called the Totem Tabloid. And the totem is the graphic symbol of the club. So whatever. And Jack, WA0RJY, was the editor, and he and I were friends. And he said, "Why don't you write something, on a regular basis for the newsletter?" So for some reason, I don't remember what it was, I had a first scene in my mind, and I just started. I said, well, every month I'll write some little bit about this guy, and he's a detective, and etc. I thought maybe it'll go 4 or 5 months or something. Well, I got in 10 months, and I had no idea where it's going. I broke absolutely every rule in the book. I just started out with a first scene, and that was it. And I just started writing from there. And about this 10th month in, I'm going, I better figure this out. So I was on a business trip, and I just went down to the hotel restaurant and said, "Can I have this table all evening?" They go, "Yeah." So I was just kind of drinking beer, and I figured out who was going to double cross who and where they were going to go, and how it was going to work. And then it was 9 more chapters. So it took a year and a half of every 30 days writing a little bit for the club newsletter. And then it sat there for a while. And then I thought, oh, it'd be fun. I could make a book out of this. And so I put it all together as a book. And then I found a bunch of inconsistencies. You have to go through and, edit it all. And then I stumbled on Jeff K1NSS. He's the Dash Tunes guy. He's a retired guy who's a cartoonist. And he did the graphics for the book. He did a wonderful job and made it really look snazzy, So I made it into a PDF. We uploaded it to lulu.com, and the rest is history. It's a ham radio novelette. There's been other ham radio novels going back. And so you asked at one point, is there going to be another one? Well, I have this title, a working title, called The Search for El Hombre, spelled OHMBRE instead of HOMBRE. And I have some characters in mind. I have a general plot, that kind of thing. But I haven't started writing, because then I know what'll happen is I won't stop writing, and it'll become one of these things. So, and maybe, I don't know, maybe.
All right. Well, the title will be hard to resist. I know that.
That'll be great,
Yeah.
Now, it's a spoof on Albert Pujols here in St. Louis. He was the big Cardinal guy for a while.
Yep.
And his nickname was El Hombre, HOMBRE, the man.
Yeah.
And he was. If you ever met him in person, I mean, he is just something. But so it was a play on that too. So
Yeah.
so we'll see. I don't know. It was a fun thing, and it was just kind of a freebie, because I'd written it for the newsletter already and just had to kind of put it in there.
It just happens that way. So at some point, you get a phone call, and they say, "Hey, the Dayton Amateur Radio Association would like to make you the Amateur of the Year."
Yeah, that's how it worked too.
And man, what a thrill that must have been.
Yeah.
It was 2008, and I can't remember where I was. I think I was traveling somewhere. I wasn't at home, and I got this call from Frank. Yeah. And KB8. I can't remember Frank's call. Anyway, he says, "Yeah, you're going to be the Ham of the Year for 2008." I was, like, "What? Really? Who is this?
Yeah.
Who's this really?" And then it kind of sunk in. So, yeah, it was just a wonderful surprise.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good for you. And then to top it off, 7 years later,
Yep.
the CQ Contest Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a note from, was it Randy? K5ZD, I think, at the time, or K1IR. No, it's Randy. K5ZD. Hey, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm like, what? Again, who is this really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is this the same guy that called me 6 years ago? What's going on?
Yeah, right. How'd you get my number? Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh, and I was just astounded, really, to get both awards. You never think you're going to get anything like that. There's certainly no application process, not that I would apply for such a thing anyway.
It didn't sound like that you set out to make that goal. You've just been taking these opportunities as they came along.
I think that's the best way to get an award, really.
Yeah.
It's not to shoot for a particular thing. If you're a pro ball player or something, I suppose.
Sure.
But I am not. And yeah, it was a real nice for a surprise, and it's sort of a validation. And I got to say, along the way, you kind of wonder, am I doing any good here? Is this actually a useful thing, or am I just fooling myself? And people go, well, we kind of like this. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I didn't expect it either, but it was, very pleasing to get it. And I was inducted into the Contest Hall of Fame along with Doug Grant, K1DG. We were sitting at the table just like we were at Tim Duffy's station. We were band partners for years in the ARL DX on 15 meters. And so I told him we had to change places after the induction ceremony. So it's my turn to sit over here. He said, no. No, it was a lot of fun. It really good.
Ward, doing all that you do you ever have time to really get on the radio?
Oh, that. Yeah, you can see my station over there,
Yeah.
When you're really, really busy with the hobby, you don't have time to do it. And my joke is you feel like a ham radio pornographer. You don't do nearly as much of it as people think you do, So I do operate. It's like when I was really active, I was on the air almost every day doing something. And now I have a fairly good station that's southwest of St. Louis, and I can operate it remotely, so I can get on here when there's something on. Yeah, I'm on. I was on Saturday night for the CW Sprint. I'm hosting a lot of multi-ops from the W0 E-Layer Contest Club, and there really is an E-Layer, Missouri, just right by my station. You have to drive through the E-Layer to get to my station. How's that? There was a guy named E-Layer, and he worked for the railroad.
Yeah.
So, but we have a group of about 15, 20 operators that'll come down, and we did the IARU NU1AW last year, not this year, but last year, and had another 6 stations, I think, around Missouri all networked in. It was quite an adventure, but I'm enjoying that more than just doing the single op. I'm still trying to push that peanut. I'd like to work North Korea, but it's not on here. But I'm trying to get to honor roll level QRP.
Oh, wow.
325. So
Really?
got a ways to go. You know what the worst thing that can happen to do a DXer? You get the 300 sticker. And the reason is that after you get the 300 sticker, you can't miss anything.
Yeah.
You're right.
They're only on every 10 years or so, so
Yeah.
it's quite a
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
We've talked about that. It's like if you hit, like I look over the list, I'm at 326. I need Bangladesh. I should be able to get that. There's 3 or 4, but boy, once you hit 330, it's like, okay, I got to have Peter the First. I got to have Bouvet. You really start. And Joe and I on this podcast and some of the DX Mentor column I do, I really encourage people, if you have a passing interest in DX, work some of these guys now, because if you get hot on it in a couple years, or maybe next time the solar cycle tilts up, there's a real good chance they're not going to be there. They are not going to raise $1 million to go to Bouvet again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Boy,
Maybe someday they'll put a radio in a box down there and we'll all work them.
Yes.
But they're so unusual and so hard to get to. And, it's work them first, worry later.
that's right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so what do you have if you look over the horizon? It's like, yeah, I know, Ray is sitting out there maybe to have another volume written, and there's what other kinds of things do you see maybe you want to jump into
Well,
here?
I'm really into this ham size stuff. I've always been a scientist at heart, and they're developing uh, a thing called the Personal Space Weather Station. And it's going to be a digitizing SDR that'll grab the entire spectrum of HF, where the cool ionospheric stuff happens. So I don't know quite what the range of it'll be. It'll hoover up a lot of data. And there'll be some kind of a mothership someplace that says, hold the last 30 minutes, or something like that. Something just happened, And so I'm going to put one of those down at my station when it's ready. I already have a WWV monitoring receiver. It's got a GPS disciplined oscillator, so you can see the Doppler shift in the ionosphere on WWV 5, 10, and 15 megahertz as the ionosphere moves up and down from sunrise and sunset. It's an amazing set of data. And we're going to have a magnetometer and, this and that. So I'm going to install a bunch of stuff down there. There's always something,
Right.
you have a station going, a big station, 3-tower station. I'm either mowing over a cable or, something falls down or, something breaks or something. If you're into systems engineering, my joke is you get your station complicated enough, the mean time between failure is negative. Never all works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe,
It's a full-time job.
Was it K6 VHF who did the work with HamSci? Does that ring?
Who? K6 which?
VHF?
Yeah, I think he's in it. The guy that's really running it is Nathaniel Frissell, W2 N0AX, Nancy Alpha Foxtrot. I'm on the board at HamSci. And so we've started for the solar eclipse QSO party in 2017. And that's where they came from. And so it's since broadened and deepened its scope into a whole bunch of different monitoring programs. The research community is delighted to have all these technically skilled, compared to everybody else, individuals out there who are willing to install reasonably sophisticated instrumentation. And it's not, NBS traceable. It's not like a professional research facility, but it's good enough that they get enough reports. Instead of 6 stations around the United States, they'll have 1,000, and it's a much different, more detailed picture. So watch for more of that. I'm really interested in seeing where that goes.
Wow. Well, Joe, did I leave anything out?
According to my sheet, you did perfect. Or maybe I should say we did perfect. All
There
three
you
of
go.
us.
Well, I'll tell you, just a couple of things for the DXers that are listening, and it's the DX Mentor podcast. So I have some suggestions to somebody who's just kind of, what is all this? And I've got 250 countries, and what do I do now? That kind of thing. First of all, don't get so wrapped up in your own goals. You can't have fun with it. You don't want to be so motivated that you start excluding other people, and you've got to behave well on the air. It's supposed to be fun. The joke is, how do you make a small fortune? Well, you start with a large one and you get into ham radio, so relax, don't get so wrapped up in your own goals that you lose sight of what's fun about ham radio. And then, like you said a few minutes ago, support and work the expeditions. They're getting more expensive and harder to pull off by the day. So get in there and participate. And when there's a group out there on the island, okay, it can be really, really, really difficult, and they're way off the beaten track. It can be hazardous to get there. I mean, when I was sailing to Curie Island, I came within this much of getting hit in the head with a big stainless steel or a big steel boom on the boat when it broke the safety line, and I had the presence of mind to duck, and it went through my hair. Okay, I mean, these things are really, they can be very hazardous. It's hot, it's cold, there are bugs, there are critters, there are no amenities. So stay positive and don't give the team a hard time. They today with Starlink and other stuff, they see all the comments and stuff like that on the internet. There's no need for that. They're out there doing it, and take it easy. Be positive, support them, be understanding, and don't bug them. Even if they didn't work you on your favorite band and mode, it's not the end of the world. So just keep DXing an enjoyable activity for everybody. Just remember Hugh Cassidy's famous words in the West Coast DX Bulletin: DX is. You get on there and you work it, whatever there is, and be happy with that.
Yes.
That's my advice, because it's something you can do for your whole life. You start as a teenager like I did, and I'll be out there. They'll be wheeling me up to the radio when I'm 90,
Oh, yes,
eight decades, believe it or not. It's amazing.
Yeah. So true.
Your orders will be only wheel me away if Korea's on the air. Otherwise,
You go, wheel grandpa in there, North Korea's on the air. That's right.
That's exactly right. Oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate all your time, your sage advice, and really learning about you. And I know several people that know you. I've heard nothing but just absolutely brilliant remarks, and what a great guy, and he's so easy to talk to, just the kind of guy we like to have on here. We like to learn from. So,
well, those are very kind words. Thank you, sir.
well, and they're well earned. So, but I appreciate it, and I will. Now, will you be in Dayton this spring, you think?
It's possible.
Okay.
We did the last Spurious Missions band thing this last year, and so that was such a big deal. I may take a year off, but we'll see.
All right. Well, if you do, we'd love to meet up somewhere. So,
we'll see you at the DX dinner.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
Joe, were you at the DX dinner when I did the Dr. Beldar thing so many years ago?
You betcha.
Oh, that was funny. I was standing in the back waiting to go on, and I had my lab coat on, and they were up there at the start trying to introduce this comedy, stand-up comedy. You want a niche market, ham radio stand-up comedy.
Boy.
So I'm standing in the back, and I'm looking around, and there's like 400 people at the tables, and I said, well, this is either going to be really great or it's going to be the end of Dr. Beldar. And we had a great time. Everybody laughed at the right times. It was huge fun. So we got to have fun with it.
Well, we had Joe dressed up as a nun, and N1DG dressed up as an Arab camel herder, I think, right? So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, we've tried a couple different things, and it always seems to work out. So,
there you go.
All righty, sir.
It's always a fun time. Well, thanks a million, Ward.
Yep, and I'll be in touch and let you know how things are going. And if we can do anything for you, please, reach out. And
no, I think we're good here. I could use a little antenna help, but that's what the guys in the E-Layer Club are for.
There you go. All right. Well, 7-3, and thanks again.
Yeah, thanks again, buddy.
Everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
I hope you found that as much fun as I did. I really enjoyed that discussion. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would also like to thank our guests today, Ward Silver, N0AX, and Joe, W8GEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur radio issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you just have a question, email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I would especially like to thank you, our listeners and viewers. Without you, there would be no reason to do this, so thank you. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event you would like us to mention. we would be happy to do that. If you're enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to follow us to get updates on future YouTube and podcast episodes, as well as ongoing DX events and DX expeditions, join us on the DX Mentor Facebook page. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.